Hello. I'm all dressed up for the holidays, so I hope you guys are in the holiday mood. My name is Delaney Drake, and I'm the head farmer here at You and Me Creamery. And I just wanted to hop on here and to celebrate all things dairy and Christmas, and just kind of start a discussion on how important dairy is to a lot of holidays, but especially to Christmas. I think dairy's gotten a bad rap, honestly, in the last few years. I feel like people don't drink it as much. People kind of underestimate how important dairy is. So this whole journey for me started when I was told I couldn't drink cow milk or goat milk. My stomach just didn't handle it well. And it's not until you are told you can't have something that you realize how important it is to you, but also how it's everywhere. It wasn't until I had a holiday where I didn't think I could drink dairy that I realized, oh my gosh, it's in everything. We started our sheep dairy because sheep's milk is the only milk that my stomach can handle. This year is our first milking season, so it's the first time I've had milk. It's the first time, milk in a while. And it's the first time in a long time where I get to celebrate Christmas with all my traditional holiday treats. So I wanted to hop on and just talk about it because I'm really excited about it. I talk to my family about it all the time, and they're like, I'm like, no, you don't understand. When you are not allowed to have it and then you have it, it is just so cool. One of the things I wanted to kind of hop on and discuss were the different forms that dairy takes. So a lot of people don't realize when they look at recipes that they make at home that even though it doesn't say milk, you're still using dairy. So one of the things that I noticed when I was looking at recipes, holiday recipes specifically, was that almost everything uses butter. And butter is dairy. It is milk, it's cream that you whip up and then you press out the buttermilk and then you're left with actual butter. So a lot of times when you look at recipes, you're like, oh, it doesn't have dairy, like sugar cookies. It's like, well, no, it actually does. It's just not in a liquid form, it's in a solid form. For me, sugar cookies and decorating sugar cookies was a huge holiday treat for me. When I was told I couldn't do dairy, that was like, that's off the table. A lot of times, even the frosting that you put on it, some people can use water, but a lot of people use milk. And so the frosting on the cookies uses milk. And same thing when you go to puddings and things like that. I used to love peppermint pound cake for Christmas Day, and that uses a lot of butter. You realize, oh, well, butter's in everything, especially in baking, and that is dairy. The other thing that people don't realize is that whipped cream and cream is also dairy. It is the skimmed off fat of milk. So whenever you have milk and you put it in the fridge, you get this thick layer on the very top, and then you scoop that up, and that's the cream. And then you whip it up in a blender, and it solidifies into whipped cream. And then if you keep blending, that's what happens when it gets to the butter. Whipped cream is basically the whipped version of that. Cream is just the stuff on the top that you scoop out. And then butter is the whipped cream that's whipped further into butter. And then you press that out, and whatever water and liquid that comes out of those solids is the buttermilk. So there's a lot of different ways and a lot of different forms that milk takes on. And so when you go into these dairy and holiday recipes, you realize, wow, there is a lot. I mean, eggnog was another favorite of mine. That one obviously had milk, but other ones, hot chocolate. We've done a hot chocolate with water. We've done hot chocolate with like the powdered stuff that I grew up with. But yeah, it's just when you realized like all the things that they put into the things at the store, you just realize it's so much cleaner to make it homemade, and it also, to actually use fresh milk is really, really, it just bumps up that flavor. And so for us, we have sheep, and I milk the sheep, and we take our milk and we either store it or we use it. This summer we used it for cheese making, for ice cream, because ice cream is my jam. That's the thing I am kind of most known for, is the ice cream. I make an amazing Tennessee honey whiskey ice cream. And so that's kind of what we did over the summer. But the holidays, it's been hot chocolate, eggnog. I've just got into making soap. I know that's not edible, but those are the things you can do with soap, other things you can do with dairy. And so I wanted to kind of do an homage, I guess, to dairy, because whenever I go online, all of the search engines for dairy is all negative. It's all, let's do dairy free, why is dairy horrible for you, and, oh my gosh, it's going to kill you. And that is not true in a lot of ways. In some ways it is. If you're someone who's sensitive to all sorts of dairy, then that is absolutely true. For me, it was anything that was at the store was tearing me up inside. Anything that's cow or goat was tearing me up on the inside. But sheep's milk I can drink. And so it was one of those, I honestly believe that you have to do what's right for your body. And if that means that you don't do dairy at all, then absolutely do that. If you're someone like me who your body said you can't do some dairies but you can do others, and I just I couldn't live without the desserts, that it's worth kind of looking into and seeing what other options are in your area, because there's a lot of dairy options out there that are not being utilized. And so that is my little speech on dairy. I love it. I love it. Oh my gosh, when you see the milk just pour, oh my gosh, it's amazing. And then you see the color. I never realized or appreciated the color of milk until I didn't have it for a while, and then we actually started milking. It is one of the most beautiful, whites that you'll ever know, in my opinion. In the descriptions, if you're interested in the hot chocolate recipe that we are going to be discussing, the link is in the description, so go ahead and head on over there. There really is not a huge difference in baking when it comes to sheep's milk versus cow's milk. The biggest difference is when it says to add milk and then add cream, heavy cream, whipped cream, whatever. A lot of times you can just use straight sheep's milk. Oftentimes see a recipe that says 1 cup milk, 2 cups heavy cream. And for us, we just go 3 cups sheep's milk, because it's basically the equivalent, because heavy cream or cream itself is incorporated into the milk, you're getting that thickness. That's really the biggest adjustment when you're going from a regular recipe to a sheep's milk recipe. There's a few tweaks, not so much in the milk, but in the other ingredients, just to kind of compensate for that little bit of discrepancy. But for the most part, it's fairly simple. And any recipe that I discuss where I use sheep's milk, if it does require the cream for like a cow's milk recipe, I will definitely let you know. This hot chocolate recipe, I believe, used just straight milk. So for our recipe, when we use sheep's milk, it's going to be a little bit creamier than, say, if you were to buy it for the cow's milk at the store. But it's still the same ingredients, I believe. It's 4 cups of milk. So it'd be 4 cups of cow's milk or 4 cups of sheep's milk. The only difference is that in the end product, you're going to get a little bit more creaminess in the final product. Unless you use like whole milk for the cow. But even then, I think there's still a little bit more sweetness in the sheep's milk. So the recipe that we're going to be doing today so it's a hot chocolate recipe. It's really, really simple. The thing that we love about this recipe in particular is the vanilla flavor that comes through. My husband and I are not huge. He's not a chocolate person. I'm a chocolate person, but I'm not a dark chocolate person. So I like my chocolate a lot sweeter. And so if you don't put as much of the vanilla in, it's a little bit more chocolatey. But if you do the recipe we have, it has a lot more of a vanilla punch. And that's what we as a family prefer. So when it comes to the vanilla, you can adjust the amount depending on your taste buds. But for us, we really like this recipe. And we liked it with the vanilla, with the amount that I'll explain later. The other thing we really liked about this recipe is it wasn't super thick. I tried to do a recipe where you added a full bar of chocolate, like extra chocolate to like the cocoa powder, and it was just really, really thick. And that is not, maybe it's because I grew up with the powdered, watered down stuff. I'm not used to the thick coated chocolate. And so when we had that, I was like, it's still really good. I just can't have much of it because it's just so rich. This is a lot more, I wouldn't say thin, but it's not as thick. And so there's a little bit more, like I can drink it a lot more, and it's not going to be huge. It's not going to sit heavy in your stomach. So I'm going to go ahead and just talk about the ingredients. And again, I'm just going to talk you guys through it and add some tips and tricks. And then if you really want a good written recipe or a good video, again, go to our blog. It's in the link in the description. It has a video of me making it, and so you can see me actually doing the chocolate. And then it also has a written recipe, so you can actually see it in writing. But the ingredients we have is it's an eighth of a teaspoon of salt, a half a cup of sugar, a third of a cup of hot water, a quarter of a cup of cocoa powder, 4 cups of milk, we use sheep's milk, and a teaspoon of vanilla. And one of the things I want to talk about is a lot of times people will mention, here I have it right here with me. There's like the organic cocoa powder. I usually just go with the cheapest stuff available, which is usually the grocery brand. So I don't really say that there's any difference between the two. They taste the same to me. One's just a little cheaper, which I use a lot of chocolate, so it makes more sense for us to go the cheaper route. But I don't know, maybe you guys have an opinion on that. If you do, let me know, because I'm curious to see if like different cocoa powders people can tell the difference. The first step is for me, what I do for the hot water is I will take the teapot that we have on our stovetop, put a little water and steam it. So I will cook that up and it will bubble. I don't know if you need it that hot. It just works really well for me, and it kind of leaves it hot. So whenever I get to it, it's still warm and I can still use it. But what you do is in a medium saucepan on medium heat, medium or large, I guess, if you're doubling, if you could do large, you're going to whisk together the sugar, the salt, the cocoa powder, and the water. And what you're going to do is you're going to stir it, and the hot water combined with the heat of the stovetop will melt the chocolate, and it will become kind of that beautiful chocolate that some of you may know. It's just brown and it just glides really nice and soft. There's no like the powdered chunks in it. So if you're getting the powdered chunks, you just heat it up a little bit more, or you just stir it a little bit longer. A whisk is great for this. You could use a spoon, but the whisk really helps to break down those powder bubbles. And then what you do is so you mix it up, make sure the chocolate is completely melted. You don't want to burn the chocolate. I've done that before. And so if you start to smell like a burnt chocolate or something burning, that's probably the chocolate. This is anything with dairy, it's kind of important you don't walk away, because milk itself can turn so quickly just from being fine to being, oh, it's burnt. So for me, when it comes to any sort of dairy recipe, I always recommend at least the first few times to stay there and make sure you have time to really keep an eye on the mixture, because it can so easily go bad. So you watch it and you make sure that it's all incorporated, that it's warm, and then what you're going to do is you're going to turn down the heat. Before we do the turning down the heat, one of the things on the recipe that I follow says bring to a simmer. I personally have issues with simmering. My simmers, especially, not so much with the chocolate, but when it comes to the milk itself, is as soon as I start to see bubbles on the corners of the milk, that's usually, and maybe it's the sheep's milk specifically, but that usually means it's already starting to go bad, and you start to see like burnt chunks coming up from the bottom. And they're not super like, I wouldn't say they're burnt, I guess. They're just chunky. And I usually have to like filter those out, and I don't like that. So for me, I just keep an eye on the temperature, and I try to make sure it just doesn't get to the simmering boiling, like where you see the little bubbles on the side, because that can so easily turn to bad. So anyway, for me, it's, I think if you have a heat gun, which I use, I believe I go anywhere from 150 degrees Fahrenheit to maybe low 60s. Like that's about as hot as I like to get the milk, because anything over that in like the 70s and 80s, it usually means it's burnt. But again, it could be different between sheep's milk and regular cow's milk. Also whole milk versus like skimmed. It could be that the cream in the milk itself heats faster. So it really just depends. That's why I say to stay at your stove top to watch it, and just make sure you kind of understand your stove, you understand the pots you're using, and you also understand the milk you're using, because all those things are factors in what can make it go bad or be fine. So once the milk, once the chocolate is liquidy and beautiful, then what you're going to do is you're going to reduce the heat. So it was already on like medium, so like I don't know, a quarter of the clicks. For me, we go numbers. So like 4 and 5 is a medium, so that'd probably be like a 3. And then what you're going to do is you're going to pour the milk in slowly. And one of the things about milk, same with eggs, is when you put something that's kind of either room temperature or cold with eggs or milk, if you put it straight into a hot liquid, it will curdle or it will cook, which you don't want. So what I do is I pour the milk in super slowly, and I like to actually pour it on the whisk itself. It will hit the little metal loops and break up the milk even more. So instead of even just a one stream going down, it breaks it into like little raindrops, and that will even help it even more to keep the milk from cooking. And you just want to be really, really careful when you're stirring it in. You don't want it to overheat. You don't want it to scald. And so you just keep an eye on it. Once it's in, the milk you're probably using, unless you're getting it straight from the sheep, which we do sometimes, like when you get it straight from the sheep, it's actually really, really warm. It's not even room temperature. It's warmer than that. But if you're getting it from the fridge, your milk is going to be cold. So when you put cold milk into the hot chocolate mixture, it's going to make your whole entire mixture colder. So when you're done pouring the milk in, you're going to want it to sit in there for a little bit on the heat to get it up to the temperature that you want. For me, I usually like lukewarm, to maybe a little warmer than that. I am not a heat person. Even tea, I'm like, ugh, it's too hot. It burns my mouth. So if you're serving right away, I would make sure that you heat it up to the temperature that you want to drink it at. If it's something that you're going to cool later and like stick in the fridge, I wouldn't heat it up as much either, because you're going to want to cool it down before you put it in the fridge completely. So just keep that in mind on when you're going to drink it and what temperature you prefer it. And all of this takes, I don't know, 5-10 minutes. It's a really quick recipe. So once the milk is the temperature that you want, you're going to remove it from the heat, and it's going to be the milk and cocoa mixture. So it's finally going to look like hot chocolate. And at this point is when you stir in the vanilla. So you don't stir in the vanilla till the very end when it's off the heat. And again, we used, a teaspoon. And so you can kind of judge it. If you want more vanilla, you can add more. If you want less and more of a chocolate flavor, you can reduce that a little bit. Just keep in mind, and you can taste as you go. Like if it's not that hot, if the mixture itself is not hot, you can add a little bit, taste it. Oh, okay, I want a little bit more vanilla. Okay. I would start with less and then add more. You can't really take vanilla out. So start with a little bit, taste it, and then you can add more. And then that's basically it. That is so simple, right? You just have a mixture where you throw in 4 ingredients, you heat it up, and then you throw in the milk, you take it off, and then you throw in the vanilla, and that's it. And so what's really cool, anyway, before we get into like just the chocolate itself, hold on, for some reason I feel fuzzy. I feel fuzzy. I look fuzzy. One of the things I will discuss is that when you store it, we usually use mason jars to store it. I wouldn't do it in the freezer. I would do it in the fridge. If you're going to do it in the freezer, just be careful with mason jars because they will break. Milk like water expands when it gets cold. So if you put it with the entire thing full, then the milk will expand and actually break your glass because your glass will get fragile when it's freezing. So you leave, I don't know, an inch or 2 at the top. And so you would only probably, well, it depends on your jar, but you'd only probably fill it to 1/3 of the way, maybe 2/3. But just keep an eye on it if it's glass. You can do it in plastic as well, but again, it does become brittle. I have done ice cream in plastic and broken the plastic because I'm trying to scoop it and go straight through the plastic. So, tin and metal is the best option if you're going to freeze like an ice cream. So you can do that with hot chocolate. To be honest, our house, we go through it so quickly, there's no point in freezing it. And it's not, you don't make a lot, it's only 4 cups of milk. So really if you have more than one person, it's going to be gone in a sitting. And if it's just you, you could probably finish it. I could finish it in a day. But people with more restraint could probably finish it in a week, which is about as good as milk is anyway. So that's for freezing. For just refrigerator stuff, again, mason jar. You can use plastic too, like a plastic water bottle or something. The only thing that's different is that because this is fresh homemade milk, the chocolate will separate. The chocolate is so heavy that it'll sink to the bottom. So you'll get kind of a very, very light brown milk on the top, and then you'll get a layer of thick chocolate on the bottom. No big deal, doesn't really matter. What I would suggest is putting it in a container that has a lid, because what we do is we just shake it. So we pull it out of the fridge in a mason jar, we just shake it up, takes a few seconds, and then the chocolate gets incorporated back into the milk, and it's good to go, aside from heating it up. And you can reheat it back on the stove. We've put it in mugs and stuck it in the microwave, and that works great too. So anyway, I hope that helped. If anyone is watching this later and has any questions, you can still pop in and add some to the comments, because I will still kind of go around and keep an eye on this video. And I'm so excited and grateful that you guys showed up and are watching this and are being graceful for my fumbles. I'm hoping to get this started at least once a week, maybe once every other week. We'll see how it goes. But I want to just hop on here, share some dairy knowledge, some dairy treats, just share my love of things, dessert and dairy, because that's just something that was gone from my life for a very long time, and it's finally back. So I'm hopping on here because I just want to celebrate. I mean, Merry Christmas! I get eggnog and hot chocolate, and we're gonna try some sugar cookies, and I don't even know what else. I've got a bunch of things where I'm like, oh, I could do that. I could do a gingerbread house. I could do this. So there's a lot going on and around our house during the holidays, and I just, it is so exciting. And I thank you guys so much for joining me, and I will see you guys next time.